A listener production.
Hi, Natarsha Belling with you and welcome to the afternoon edition of The Briefing. Coming up in our deep dive, a political bombshell has just rocked Parliament House in Canberra, with 3 National MPs quitting after opposing the coalition's stance on hate speech laws. In a week the PM was under the most pressure of his career, the opposition has just blown itself up, with Sussan Ley's leadership now again under fire. All the details coming up in just a moment. But first, let's check the afternoon headlines this Wednesday, the 21st of January. US President Donald Trump has refused to say how far he would go to acquire Greenland, but has warned there is no going back, saying, quote, Greenland is imperative. It comes as the leaders of both France and Canada make controversial speeches about the US at the World Economic Summit in Switzerland. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney says the old world order is over, saying we're in the middle of a rupture, not a transition. Warning Canada must diversify to become less reliant on countries like the United States.
Great powers have begun using economic integration as weapons. Tariffs as leverage, financial infrastructure as coercion, supply chains as vulnerabilities to be exploited. You cannot live within the lie of mutual benefit through integration when integration becomes the source of your subordination.
French President Emmanuel Macron also taking a stand, saying the US president's tariff threats are unacceptable.
We do believe that we need more growth, we need more stability in this world. But we do prefer respect to bullies, we do prefer science to plotism, and we do prefer rule of law to brutality.
The US president is travelling to Switzerland to meet with the world leaders at the World Economic Summit. A top barrister has been charged with possessing child abuse material after being arrested at Sydney Airport yesterday. Police allege Mark Dennis, SC, who's been a barrister for more than 25 years, had images of child sex abuse and conversations with and about minors on his phone. Australian Federal Police arrested the 65-year-old after he returned from a planned trip to Cambodia, where he runs a charity for disadvantaged youth. He's been granted strict conditional bail. Premier David Crisafulli has confirmed Queensland will not partake in the federal government's gun buyback scheme that was passed by Parliament yesterday.
Queensland won't be going down the path of gun buyback because it doesn't address anti-Semitism and hate, and it doesn't focus on keeping guns out of the hands of terrorists and criminals. So that's going to be our focus.
Mr Crisafulli has indicated that new legislation will be introduced into state parliament. Meantime, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese says Queensland's decision not to participate is not in the interests of locals or the nation. A new research has revealed that cows may be far smarter than we first thought. Researchers in Vienna studied a cow named Veronica, who uses a broom and other instruments, including rakes, with remarkable precision. She chooses bristles for tougher spots and smooth handles for more sensitive areas, a level of tool use previously only documented in animals like chimpanzees. The researchers say the discovery challenges long-held assumptions about the intelligence of animals. Now it's time to get into our deep dive on a new political crisis that has again split the coalition. 3 National senators have quit the shadow cabinet after breaking ranks on Labor's hate crime laws. So exactly what does this latest setback mean for the future of the Liberals and the Nationals, who are now both fighting for survival as support for One Nation soars? To unpack all of today's fallout, we're joined by 7 News political editor Mark Riley from Parliament House in Canberra. Mark, extraordinary developments, even as we record this episode. The latest information we have this afternoon is 3 National senators have quit the coalition shadow cabinet following their split with the Liberals over hate laws. How extraordinary is this?
Unprecedented, amazing, stupid politically, surprising, and I don't think it's over. I think it'll have ramifications that will reverberate for some time. It's another undermining of the authority of Sussan Ley, even though she's taking a strong stand this afternoon in sacking those 3 National senators. I guess more accurately, she's accepted their letters of resignation, but it's just more turmoil within the coalition and within that relationship between the Nationals and the Liberal Party, which of course blew up after the election. We had that incredible schism, the divorce, if you like, and then the reconciliation. Part of that reconciliation, and Sussan Ley has made this point today saliently, part of that reconciliation agreement was that the National Party members would honour shadow cabinet solidarity. That is, they would vote in line with shadow cabinet decisions. In this case, they haven't. And the convention on that is that if you don't, then the punishment is that you're sacked or you should offer your resignation. And that is what happened with these three members.
Okay, Mark, let's start with the Nationals. Who are they going to get to replace these? There's not a lot in the bank right now, correct?
That's right. This is the thing. Ordinarily, these are three senators. So Ross Cadell from New South Wales, Bridget McKenzie from Victoria, and Susan McDonald, who have crossed the floor and voted against the hate crime laws last night in the Senate, breaching the shadow cabinet position agreed between the Liberals and the Nationals, which was to not vote against these measures. The National Party official position on its own was to abstain, but like Brown's cows, they were all over the place. Some abstained, some voted, as we know, against it, breaching the shadow cabinet solidarity. Michael McCormack, the former National Party leader, went the other way, joined the government and voted for the legislation. So they were all over the shop. The problem is that it's a game of numbers. These are three Senate positions for the Nationals on the shadow cabinet, now all resigned, which leaves three Nationals Senate openings. The problem is there's only one other National senator available. They only have four senators, three of them are unavailable, and the fourth is Matt Canavan, who's something of a firebrand and a bit of a troublemaker from Queensland LMP. And so now David Littleproud might have to find candidates from the House of Representatives to fill those positions. So it is one heck of a shoe muzzle.
So in regards to the future of the coalition, Mark, we know they had a divorce, they were separated, they went back to counselling, they were all happy
like
again.
The Kardashians, isn't it? Yeah.
It is, but it's real life. So would it be right for me to say this is a try at a second marriage, or they look like they're actually going to get divorced permanently?
Yeah, it's looking like the reconciliation isn't sticking all that well. There's some residual suspicions and enmities that have come across. Look, it's the relationship between the Nationals and the Liberals historically has been a difficult one. The good leaders have been able to manage that. Tim Fischer and John Howard famously, Mark Vaile as well, John Anderson as Nationals leader, Warren Truss certainly, and Michael McCormack did a good job of it. Barnaby Joyce not so much, got thrown out out of the shadow cabinet and in the leadership because of the Malcolm Turnbull's bulk ban. But for Sussan Ley and David Littleproud, it's a really different scenario. Now, we were talking about a coalition during the Howard years, which was in ascendancy. This is now a conservative relationship that's fighting for its survival. It's trying to mark out its ground on a shifting political landscape where people have made a pretty emphatic decision in the last election on Labor and going to Labor, a very broad victory for Labor but shallow in the numbers. But a broad victory, and those on the right are now searching for an alternative. They don't see the Liberals, they see them as too soft, and they don't see the Nationals as representing the hardline values that they want, so they're going to one nation. So the decision that the leaders have to make is, what is their best path to survival? Is it as a partnership? Is it together? Do they stay married? Or are they going to be better off going their separate ways and perhaps seeking different relationships with other like-minded political minor parties? It's always a possibility. And I think that's, there's still now wrestling with what has been now an 8-month existential crisis.
In regards to the future of the leadership for both Sussan Ley and David Littleproud, what do you think these latest developments mean for their fight for survival as leaders of both parties that you are rightfully saying are fighting for survival right now?
I think it's probably net positive for Littleproud and net negative for Sussan Ley. I mean, this was a challenge to her authority. She's now stood up to that. There are other rumblings going on behind the scenes that might become apparent over the next 24 hours. There are other things going on here. As you know, Tash, politics is very layered. There's what happens on the surface and is obvious, and there's what happens in the dark shadows of this place, and that can be very nasty indeed. And there's a fair bit of that going on today, let me tell you. But it's, for Sussan Ley, a real challenge again to her authority. I think she had no real option but to accept those resignations and to say, this is the standard. You accepted the standard, the National Party, when the parties reunited after the breakup, that shadow cabinet solidarity was sacrosanct, that you can't vote against the positions that are taken by the front bench and the leadership team. And if you do, there are consequences. These are the consequences of enforcing the law. So there was a strength in that. However, it makes her vulnerable because of the repercussions that could come because of that decision. For David Littleproud, the Nationals, certainly in the Parliament and probably their constituency, would say, good on you, you stood up for us again.
So in regards to Anthony Albanese, we know he's been under extraordinary pressure.
The most relieved man in Australia, you mean?
Yes.
Anthony Albanese.
Yes, especially considering these developments. So let's talk about that, because that's fascinating, right? He was under the greatest pressure of his leadership. We know, there's semantics over whether he backed down or whether it was a compromise over the Royal Commission into the terror attack. And then, of course, the absolute disastrous rollout of this legislation. What are your thoughts on that and his leadership right now?
Yeah, this is a leave pass. I mean, he would be like almost literally the most relieved person, certainly in Australian politics today, because he is, and I don't say this glibly, he is under the most intense pressure of his prime ministership, of any period of his prime ministership at the moment. And the coalition has decided to launch a full-on attack on itself. Brilliant. I don't know what sort of genius thought that was a good tactic, but it's a very special sort of genius. Albanese tonight will be thinking, well, I got my legislation through. It wasn't the legislation that he wanted, of course, too, Tash. There were concessions made in this. So the omnibus bill that he had, which just means all the components put in one piece of legislation, that's normally a political tactic to wedge opponents. We know when they say omnibus bill that there's a lot of politics laid in that. He broke it into two pieces so he could have a hate bill separated from the gun laws, knowing he'd get the Greens to support the gun laws, the Liberals at least, not the Nationals in the end, or other than Michael McCormack, to back the hate laws legislation, which had been considerably watered down. And the gun laws had been amended to allow the Liberals to go back to allow the Greens, to go back to their constituency with some changes. So he made concessions all the way through. And you're right, he did back down the Royal Commission. There's no other way of saying it. We heard what he said for weeks upon weeks, that it wasn't necessary. It would divide the country. It would set Australia against Australia, be counterproductive, it would be expensive. And suddenly he backed it for a political reason, not for a policy reason in the end. And he was probably forced, well, no, not probably, he was forced into that political corner and had to do that. So now, at a time where that intensity, and I'm telling you, there were some Labor people who were really worried about Anthony Albanese standing in the community, the long-term effect that this period might have on his standing as a leader. And suddenly the coalition say, well, you think he's in trouble? Look at us.
It's been an extraordinary 24 hours, 48 hours in Parliament. You've been covering politics for decades. Have you ever seen anything like this?
No, not of this character. I've seen some extraordinary things in this place and this time, but not in internal politics. I've not seen coalition of parties particularly tearing themselves apart to this degree, but also just the abject stupidity in some of the political tactics that have been employed in this and the timing of it. I know that they wanted to make a stand, and it's a compressed sitting, only 2 days, but no one really thought this through, and I don't think it'll shine well on any of the coalition parties longer term, and it can only lead to a bad outcome. And I think if I was Sussan Ley, I'd be very worried. If I were Anthony Albanese, I'd be immensely relieved. And if I were David Littleproud, I'd probably say, wow, I got through that and I'm still standing.
Thanks so much, Mark.
Thanks, Taj. Pleasure.
And that was 7 News political editor Mark Riley joining us from Canberra. And that's it for this episode of the afternoon edition of The Briefing. We'd love you to subscribe or follow us on Instagram @The Briefing Podcast. I'm Natasha Belling. Thanks for your company.